Okay, so my biggest complaint about this motorcycle is the front suspension. The springs on the inside of the fork tubes are very, very weak, and so they wear out very quickly. So the mechanic at the dealership here had a solution for the problem, and what he did was just put a little bit more fork oil in each fork, and he put a bigger spacer inside the fork to compress the spring a bit more, and that worked for a little while. It made it a lot more stiff, but that was almost a year ago, and now the spring is almost completely worn out. It's way too soft now, so we're going to try to replace the springs. Okay, so the problem is I don't want to replace the springs with the original factory springs, because it'll be the same problem. I'll have to change them out every year, and I don't want to mess with that. So I looked everywhere in my town, and I couldn't find anybody who had springs that actually fit this motorcycle, that are made for this motorcycle, that aren't the factory Honda springs. So I found, ironically, at a Yamaha dealership, I found some springs that are actually made for the Honda Cargo, but these were made in Brazil, I believe, and the original ones were made in China, so maybe they'll be better quality. That's what I'm hoping. So the only challenge with these springs is the diameter. So they're the correct length, the same length as the same springs. They're made for a motorcycle that's pretty similar in weight and suspension travel, so that's not an issue. But they're actually about half a millimeter less in diameter. So this is about half a centimeter. This is about a centimeter and a half wide in diameter, whereas the original ones are about a little bit over 2 centimeters wide. So the challenge is going to be adapting them. So I have a couple of ideas to try to adapt this so that it'll fit diameter-wise, but I'm just going to have to take the old springs out and experiment with it. So let's try that. So to get to the fork springs, first we're going to have to take off the handlebars. So we're just going to remove this plastic cover. There is a screw on each side. It's a Phillips screw, and then under that there are 4 bolts that hold on the handlebars. So we're going to have to take that off. Okay, so these are 10 millimeter bolts. I find it easiest to get to them if you use kind of a long, narrow extension like the socket driver. Goes in real nice like that. Otherwise, the ratchet kind of gets in the way. Okay, so now we got these parts taken off. I find it easiest to just move the whole thing back. Move these cables around the speedometer here, and just kind of let that fall in front. And now we have access to take these off to get to the forks. Okay, so for this, you're going to need a 15 millimeter socket. I really suggest doing this with the ratchet. It would be really hard to do otherwise. So I recommend turning the front forks, the kind of steering part, to the left when you're going to loosen it. That way it's at full lock and it's not going to move around on you. And vice versa, when you go to tighten it back up, you're going to want to turn it to the right. That's for both sides. So here we go. Just going to break it loose. There it is. And you're going to want to be careful. After a little bit here, the spring is going to jump up. Alright, so as you loosen this up, the thing is, this is under pressure from the spring. So be watching as you loosen it up. You're going to see this rubber seal come up. Should see it right about there. And so just a little bit past that rubber seal is when the threads actually disengage. When that happens, the pressure from the spring is going to want to push this thing up. So when you get to about here, I recommend putting your hand on there and be pushing down as you loosen it. It's going to take more time, but it's not going to launch your ratchet across the floor. So here we go. Pressure, because I don't know exactly when this is going to release. So I'm putting pressure, putting my body weight into it, so that when it does, I'm ready. You can see we've come past the this much past the seal, and it still hasn't popped out yet, so should be getting close though. I think that's it right there. Cool. So notice how it didn't launch this across the room because I had that pressure on there. So there's a tip for you. Okay, so this is what it's going to look like once you get this top off. We have this. I'm going to set that aside. And then we have the spacer. Now this is the one that the Honda mechanic, the mechanic at the dealership, put in. The original spacer was maybe about half this. I don't remember exactly. So then if you look down inside here, bring it and look inside there, you can see the spring right in there. So I'm just going to stick my finger into the spring and pull it up just like that. When you do this, be careful because it's going to be dripping fork oil. So have something ready to clean that up so you don't drip it all over the place. Then have maybe some paper to set this down so that you don't get your floor too dirty. Okay, so when you pull this out, you're going to want to pull it out very slowly. Down at the bottom of the spring, there's a lot of oil, and if you pull it out too fast, it's going to bring that oil and spill it all over, just like I did here. So pull it out very slowly. Watch the spring as it's coming out to make sure that you're not bringing a lot of oil with it. So right about here is where it starts to have a lot of oil concentrated. Just pull it out very slowly. You probably can't see it on the video, but I can see the oil kind of dripping off the spring inside the tube. So make sure that stays inside the tube because we don't want to lose our fork oil. I'm not going to be replacing the oil for this, so we don't want to spill too much out of there. Almost there. Almost. There we go. So you can see we've let most of the oil drip off. So I've got this on the floor ready. And just like that. Okay, so just for a quick comparison, this is the original fork. You can see how much wider it is. And this is the fork, excuse me, the original spring. And this is the new spring that we're going to be putting in. So I'm going to have to find a way to make it so that it's not a problem that this is narrower. I don't know what I'm going to do, but we'll figure something out. Okay, so here's one crazy idea I have, is to put this spring inside of the old spring. If you stick it together and just start twisting it, it'll actually kind of go in there, and that could potentially solve the issue of this spring not being wide enough. But it might be just way too stiff. So I'll probably only try that as a last resort. I've got a couple other ideas I'm going to try first. Okay, so I have two pieces of PVC pipe. This one is Schedule 40 half-inch pipe. I'm going to use this for the spacer, to make a new spacer. And this is a 3/4 inch. I don't know what schedule it is. It's a lot thinner than Schedule 40, 3/4 inch. And the spring fits inside of here. So one idea I have is to maybe put a section of this pipe inside the fork and then put that in there so that the spring isn't moving side to side as it compresses. So I'm going to play with that and see what happens. Okay, so here's the original spacer. That is about 3.5 inches. Well, not the original spacer, the one that the mechanic put in there. So I don't know how long the original spacer was exactly. It looked like it was about 2 inches. So I've cut two lengths of PVC pipe 2 inches long to use as the new spacers. I'm going to try that first, and if that doesn't work, well, I can adjust. If I need less shorter spacer or longer one, I can just cut more pipe. Now, the issue with this is the inside of the pipe is almost just the right size for this spring to fit inside. So I'm afraid with a lot of compression that the spring might actually go inside the pipe. So here's what I'm going to do is I'm going to just heat the end up on the stove. You could use a heat gun or whatever heat source you want to. I'm going to heat it up so that it's pliable. I'm going to push it in so that this part will kind of narrow out and it'll be kind of oval shaped, but then it won't have the problem of the spring going inside. So we'll try that. Okay, so after heating it and flattening the ends, this is what I have. Both ends flattened. They're still the same length. So just make sure you clean up all of the those little tiny pieces that you get if you use a saw. Clean that up or they'll just kind of burn up in the flame. So, and you don't want those going down inside and contaminating the oil. So make sure you clean those little pieces up. There it is. Let's see if it works. Alright, so the purpose of this tube, the other PVC pipe, is for the spring to go inside there, and then this pipe is going to go inside of the fork tube, and hopefully that will keep it from moving around too much. So we have a 39 centimeter long tube minus 2 inches for the 2-inch spacer, and then minus 116 millimeters of suspension travel, minus just a little bit more for have some room for error. Leaves us with a 30 centimeter long tube, so that way hopefully it'll cover a good portion of the spring, keep it from moving around too much side to side. Okay, so here we have the 2-inch spacer, the spring, and this tube to keep it from moving around too much. I'm going to put that in each fork tube, and we're going to try it out and see how it works. Okay, so we've got everything in there. Here's the spacer. So when you do this, it's kind of tricky. You got to push it in, and you're going to have to push it down, all the way down. Put all your weight in there until you get to the end where you can't push it down anymore, and start twisting it. Give it a good turn, and it should have engaged. So now I take my hand off. That means that the threads have engaged, and then you just push it in. Screw it in. So now we're going to do the same thing to the other fork and see if it works. Alright, so the 2-inch spacers were too long. It made it a little bit too stiff, so I made this set of spacers that are 1.5 inches. Exactly the same way I did before. So we're going to try that out and see how it works. Okay, so it's been a few days since I've done all that stuff. I've tested the new springs out on the road, out in the dirt. I beat the crap out of it off-road, and it works pretty darn well. The suspension travel is really only like 3 inches, maybe like 3 1/4 when you really hit it hard. And on paper it's supposed to have like 4.5 or something like that, 116 millimeters, whatever that works out to into inches. So it's not getting the full suspension travel. I'm not sure why. Maybe the website has the wrong specifications. I can't get a hold of an owner's manual. The dealership won't sell me one. So anywho, it works pretty well though, and it never did get more than like 3 inches of suspension travel anyway with the original springs. So try that out, and it should work for you.